30 minutes. That's how long it took for a tennis match, a second-round match. Not a final, not even a quarterfinal, to sell out a stadium that hadn't been built for her yet. The player who did it wasn't ranked in the top 5. She wasn't even seated in the top 20. And somewhere inside a ticketing office in Toronto, a grown man looked at his own dashboard and didn't recognize the numbers staring back at him. Stay with me. 2 a.m. in Quezon City. A phone lights up on a nightstand, then another one across the street, then 100 more scattered across the same city. A family huddles around a laptop propped against a rice cooker, half asleep, refusing to close their eyes until the last point is played, 7 time zones away, on a court that was never built to hold this many watchers. A match is happening that most of the tennis world doesn't even know is happening. Nobody in that room is getting paid to care. Nobody sent them a reminder. They just showed up, the way they always do now. That kind of loyalty doesn't have a marketing budget behind it. It has a name instead: Eala, and a country that has decided, without discussion, to stay awake for her. Toronto, in August. So a stadium, home for 2 weeks to a tournament so prestigious it carries its own quiet formality, the National Bank Open, though most people on the street still call it by its older name, the Canadian Open. The women play here. The men are 2 provinces away in Montreal, a detail that trips up even seasoned fans. It's the kind of scheduling footnote nobody thinks twice about, until a tournament director has to stand in front of a camera and explain, carefully, why he tore up his own rulebook in the middle of the week. Because court assignments on the WTA Tour are not guesswork. They are built on a formula, refined over years, trusted by every stop on the calendar. Ranking goes in, court size comes out. Top 10, you get the big room, 10,000 seats. Cameras stacked 3 high, sightlines built for a champion. Everyone else gets the smaller rooms. Efficient, sensible, still respectable by any measure. The grandstand court holds 2,800 seats. That's where Alex Eala's second-round match was scheduled to be played. 21 years old. World number 20. The first Filipino player, man or woman, to ever reach that ranking. By every rule the tour has ever written, she belonged in that room. Then, the tickets sold. All of them. In half an hour. And somebody, somewhere in that stadium's back office, had to make a call no scheduling manual had ever prepared him for, because the room built for her wasn't big enough for what she'd actually become. Rewind 7 months. January, the Australian Open, first round. She won the opening set 6-love clean, almost bored in its efficiency, and then lost the next 2. Folding in a way that looked, from the outside, like a promising player finding her ceiling early. She left Melbourne 0-1 in her head-to-head against the American who beat her. No press conference meltdown, no story to chase, just a quiet flight home and a ranking that stayed stuck outside the top 30, the kind of result that gets filed away and forgotten by everyone except the player who lived it. What came after that loss is the part worth sitting with, because most careers don't survive a moment like that without changing shape. Hers did something else. It sharpened. She climbed from the low 40s to world number 20 in 7 months, a rise most players spend 3 or 4 years chasing, if they get there at all. She reached the quarterfinals in Hamburg on grass she'd barely competed on. She walked onto Wimbledon's center court against the defending champion and beat her in straight sets. A result so far outside the expected script that commentators paused mid-sentence trying to process it live, on air. Then Washington. A final that started on a Sunday and didn't finish until Monday morning, delayed by rain, played against the third-ranked player alive. She dropped the first set. Then something shifted. Not panic, not desperation. Just a gear nobody had seen her use before. She won 12 of the next 14 games. Final score, 4-6, 6-4, 6-0. That's not a collapse from her opponent. That's a total change in the level of tennis being played on that court, and Eala was the one who forced the change. The win pushed her past $1.5 million in career prize money. It made her the first player from the Philippines ever to win a WTA singles title. 5 days later, 5 days, trophy still barely unpacked, she landed in Toronto and walked straight into a scheduling crisis nobody had built a model for. Here's what almost nobody says out loud about that loss in Melbourne. It wasn't a step backward. It was the version of her that hadn't finished becoming this one yet. 6-love, 3-6, 2-6, a scoreline that in most careers gets filed away as inconsistency. A player who peaks for one set and fades, over and over, until the fading is the only thing people remember. That's the narrative that could have stuck. For a while, it almost did. Except the loss did something the Washington win could never have done alone. It gave the story a hinge, a before and an after, a wound that needed answering. Because the same player who let that first set lead slip away in January walked back onto a hard court in Toronto in August, faced the exact same opponent who had beaten her, and closed it out 6-1, 4-6, 6-2. Same name across the net, almost the same scoreline, flipped on its head. That isn't a coincidence, a highlight reel invents afterward. It's simply what happens when someone spends 7 months turning a loss into information instead of an excuse, studying a defeat instead of burying it. The setback didn't slow this story down. It's the reason the story carries weight now. The reason a stadium in another country cared enough to sell out in 30 minutes. Toronto's tournament director, Carl Hale, has run this event for years. He isn't a man given to overstatement. His entire job depends on trusting a system that's worked for over a decade. So when he spoke about what happened with Eala's ticket sales, he chose his words like someone still doing arithmetic in his head, live, on camera. The grandstand holds 2,800 seats, he said. She'd likely sold upward of 5,000 tickets for that single match, nearly double what the room could physically hold. And then, almost as an aside, he added that every tournament director on the tour was talking about it. Not politely. Constantly, in hallway conversations and group chats stretching from Cincinnati to Beijing. That's the sentence that should stop you. Not sold out. Every director on the entire calendar, recalculating what they thought they understood about demand because of one player, ranked 20th in the world, on a Wednesday night, in a city she doesn't officially call home. There's a name for it now. Inside the sport. People are calling it the Eala Effect. It isn't hype dressed up as a headline. It's a number a spreadsheet simply didn't have a column for. So why Toronto? Why did the math break here, specifically, and not somewhere else on the calendar first? Start with the raw number. Just under 1 million Filipino Canadians live in this country, and more than 250,000 of them call the Greater Toronto Area home, a population projected to nearly triple over the next 2 decades. For a player with no home tournament of her own, no Grand Slam on Filipino soil, no WTA 1000 anywhere near Manila, a city like this stops being a neutral dot on a map. It becomes the closest thing she has to a home crowd anywhere on Earth. And once you see it in Toronto, you start noticing it everywhere behind her. Fans lining up 6 hours early outside a stadium in the California desert, wrapped in blankets past midnight, refusing to leave even after the match ran into the next day. A tournament director in Dubai admitting, almost sheepishly, that he had never in his career seen anything like the demand her matches created there. A neighborhood near Flushing Meadows that locals simply call Little Manila, where she once said, plainly, that she doesn't have a home tournament of her own, so an entire community decided, without being asked, to become one for her. One match at a time. One summer at a time. City after city. Continent after continent. Andy Roddick said it about as bluntly as anyone on the men's side has dared to. Watch parties filling arenas back home for a 4th-round match, he said, on his own podcast, without a trace of irony. If that's what this era of tennis looks like, he said, he's in. This is the part that reaches past the scoreboard entirely, past rankings and prize money and seeding formulas, because underneath every ticket sold in 30 minutes is something older than professional tennis itself, a country watching one of its own do something nobody from that country has ever done before, and deciding together, without a campaign telling them to show up for it. Not once, as a novelty. Every single week, as a habit, as a kind of devotion that has nothing to do with the sport itself, and everything to do with who's playing it. A ticketing algorithm can't measure that. It can only be surprised by it, after the fact, when the numbers come in. Here's what should make you impatient. Not satisfied. She is not finished. And it would be a mistake to talk about her like she already is. Cincinnati begins within days of Toronto's final ball being struck. Then the US Open at the end of August. The first Grand Slam of her career where she walks in as a seeded player instead of an underdog clawing through outer courts and early rounds. Somewhere in the next 12 to 18 months, if this trajectory holds anything close to steady, there is a real, serious conversation to be had about her cracking the top 10 in the world. WTA has already moved once in response to all of this, launching the Philippines' first ever WTA-level tournament earlier this year, a quiet admission from the tour itself that the ticketing dashboards were telling them something the rankings alone never could. None of that is guaranteed. Careers bend and stall for reasons nobody can predict, hers included. But all of it is close enough now to touch. Close enough that looking away would be its own kind of mistake. The top of women's tennis has been dominated for the better part of a decade by a small, familiar handful of countries: the United States, Poland, Spain, Belarus, the Czech Republic. A player from a nation of over 100 million people, with almost none of the infrastructure those countries take for granted. Breaking into the top 20 isn't a footnote sitting quietly at the bottom of that story. It's the first visible crack running through it. And cracks like that don't close back up quietly. So go back to the room. 2,800 seats, that's what an algorithm, built on years of reliable data, calculated Alex Eala was worth in Toronto this week. 10,077, that's the room she actually filled. On a Wednesday night. On 5 days rest. Fresh off winning a title nobody from her country had ever won before. The gap between those two numbers isn't a scheduling error someone will quietly patch before next season. It's a country's worth of people refreshing a ticketing page 30 minutes after her name appeared on a printed order of play, in a city 7,000 miles from where she was born, on painted-over basketball courts, in a sport her country never had the money to build for her. The tournament didn't upgrade her court because of what she might do someday. They upgraded it because of what had already happened, and their own model simply wasn't built to see it coming in time. If you've ever stayed up past your own bedtime watching Alex Eala play a match that wasn't even supposed to matter yet, tell me where you were the first time you saw her walk onto a court. In a few years, when everyone knows this name, you'll want a record of when you knew first.